The struggles with mental health happen long before an anxiety attack or the depressional slums. There are signs and signals that happen long before we get to that point, but you will only recognize them when you know how to approach mental health on a holistic level, to look deep into the soul long before we get to that point where you're unable to function, you're unable to move, or you lack the energy to get up and move. Now, when we are struggling in mental health, there really is a battle that goes on inside your head. And so there's the conscious side that says, I know what I want to do. I know where I want to go. I know what needs to happen today, but you just can't do it because the subconscious patterns have been set and they are just running this program. So you have a program in your brain that says, this is what we do when we struggle with mental health. So now I'm not going to get out of bed, or I'm going to just sit in the corner with my blanket and read a book because I physically cannot do anything else. So we know that there are physical signs. We know that there are things that we physically need to get up and be able to do, and we just can't do them. I first started struggling with mental health when I was pregnant with my fourth son. And so I had been pregnant before. I know what postpartum was. I knew what it was like to be excited to have a baby, and I just was not. So I asked my midwife, I said, is it possible to have like a prepartum, depression before the baby is born? And she was like, oh yeah, it happens all the time. And I was like, well, I'm definitely struggling with that. So I asked her, I said, what can I do? And she said, well, based off of the conversation that we have, I have some antidepressants that I want you to start. And I couldn't bring myself to do that. I told her that I didn't want to take medication while I was pregnant. And she assured me that it was safe and everything, it wouldn't affect the baby. And I told her that I just really didn't want to take antidepressants. And I said, what other options do I have? And she said, you don't have any other options. With where you're at, it's so severe, you have to start antidepressants. So I went and I filled my prescription, and I came home and I talked to my husband and I said, I just don't know if I can do this. And so we talked through a couple different things, and it's like, let's just see what happens. Meanwhile, my thoughts are getting darker, my energy is getting less, and I just struggled to be able to maintain. At this point, I didn't have any physical harm, suicidal for me, but there was no part of me that wanted to keep the baby because my brain told me that it was all the baby's fault. Like, if you can just terminate the baby, then everything will be fine. But I knew I didn't want to do that. I had 3 other kids. We're so excited to have a baby brother. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I started researching, and I found a holistic clinic that worked with every single aspect that I knew was being affected by this condition, by this depression. And I knew that was something that I needed to do. So I made an appointment and I went down, and on my drive down, it was about an hour away. And on my drive down, I said, I'm on my way to go get help. I'm just going to let my thoughts go. I'm going to stop fighting it, and I'm just going to let it be. And I was so heavy. I just sobbed and sobbed on my way down there because I didn't know darkness like that. I didn't know how intense it could actually be. So from my midwife's perspective, she could see that physically I was struggling. I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't want to do anything productive. I wanted to terminate the life of my unborn child. She could see that mentally my thoughts were getting darker and darker, that I couldn't think clearly, I couldn't focus. She knew the physical and the mental side. But that wasn't the whole story. And there was something a little bit deeper than that. And that is where this holistic approach really comes from. Because when you're struggling with mental health, you have to address it from the inside out. The behaviors and the things on the outside that you can see, yes, they need to be addressed. But if we don't address what's happening on the inside of us, then we start to fall short. Or you could put a Band-Aid on it and you don't actually make progress at the root of where this all started from in the first place. And so we need to bridge the gap that is keeping people from identifying what is the root. What is the thing that we are really struggling with on the inside? And that's where all of this comes from. When you take a holistic approach, we're going to address the physical side. We're going to address the mental side. We also have to address the emotional side. And so it's important to learn how to regulate emotions. Yes, in depression, you feel sad or alone, right? We feel dark. In anxiety, you feel overwhelmed. You feel worried about things. We feel a lot of intense emotions, and we need to have things that help us know how to regulate that emotion. So let's look at these three aspects and how they all work together and which one starts first. Typically, especially as we are talking about mental health, everything's going to start internally before it manifests externally. And so as you're struggling with mental health, you will emotionally feel off. And then you'll begin to mentally feel off. You'll start to have thoughts like, this isn't normal. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. And then the physical will start to manifest itself. Everything interacts that way. It starts emotional, then it goes mental, then it goes physical. If we don't address it on an emotional level, then it's going to turn mental. If we don't address it on a mental level, it's going to turn physical. That's how our body works. So if you have been struggling with mental health, your first sign before you slide into an episode is to watch how you're feeling. Now, if this is not something that you're practiced at, you have to come at this with zero judgment. If you're feeling off, if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling angry, this is not something to then mentally jump on yourself and be like, I can't believe that. I shouldn't be feeling that way. This is dumb. Don't judge those emotions. They're coming in, and those emotions are an indicator of where you are at. And it is okay to have those feelings. But it's not okay for us to stay there. We don't want to continue down that road. We want to be able to start to shift that if we can. And so how you're feeling, that emotional side, really are the early signs of something that is feeling off. That can be triggered by circumstances outside of you. Maybe that's triggered by your children or a job or a sibling or a parent or a neighbor. It can be anything that can be triggered in one way, and then if we don't know how to regulate our emotions, it puts us in a place where we naturally just slide down. And then next thing you know, tomorrow morning we're going to wake up and have one of these episodes. You have to become aware of the emotional side. But there's that fourth piece, and that's the last missing piece of your soul. When we look at the physical combined with the mental, combined with the emotional, combined with a spiritual side of you, that makes the soul. Mental depression targets all four of those. When we look at a spiritual side, this is connected to your purpose. Do you know where you're going? Are you feeling fulfilled with your life? It connects to the deepest parts of your heart. And mental health, for my story specifically, is depression. When we have these deep, intense emotions, it is not just affecting the thoughts or the emotional side of me. It is affecting all four sides. It affects my entire soul. And so when you are struggling with something, you have to understand that it is not just mental. It is not just emotional, but you are dealing with it on all 4 accounts of your soul. And when you can start to pinpoint, this is mental, that's spiritual, this is physical, and pull those apart, we start to be able to understand mental health on a whole new level. And you can also bring it to a place where you can stop an episode from happening when you know how to regulate what's going on the inside. So after I had told my midwife that I did not want to take medication, after I told her that I didn't want to go down that road anymore, I did a lot of research and I found a holistic clinic that would take mental health on a soul approach, that it would address the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, and work on them together. When we just throw an antidepressant at it, what it does is it helps change the chemicals in your brain so that you feel better. That is backed by science. We know that's what happens. But if that's not where the root of the problem is, then you're just covering it with a Band-Aid and you're not actually making the progress. So if the chemicals are off in your brain, awesome. Does your doctor know which chemical is off? My midwife could not tell me, which is why I struggled just throwing an antidepressant at it, because I wanted to know what was off. I went to this holistic clinic and they were able to go through and break it all down. This is where you're off spiritually. This is where you're off emotionally. This is what's happening mentally. And here is the physical piece. And so we started treating the physical side as well as the mental side. I brought in my tools as a neurocoach to deal with the mental side, the emotional side. So I was covering mental, emotional, and spiritual in my regimen to help me get into a better place. When you approach mental health on a soul level, from a holistic level, and you're looking at it from all 4 different sides, you are going to gain greater results, more lasting results, and help you get into a place where you feel like you are back in control. On our next video, we're going to be talking about specific things that you can do on all 4 of these sides when you feel like something's off, so you can stop those episodes from happening in the first place.